Mrs. Carmen, one of the wealthiest women in the country, always worried about her children's attitudes toward their inheritance. Knowing that her death was near, she prepared a special surprise for the reading of her will to ensure that her children wouldn't act out of self-interest in the division of her assets. When she died, they were extremely anxious to receive their inheritance, but they had no idea that Mrs. Carmen was several steps ahead of them. Mrs. Carmen's mansion stood imposingly against the gray autumn sky. Her 3 children, Roberto, Sonia, and Larissa, waited in the living room, where time seemed to have stopped since their mother's passing. Antique furniture and heavy curtains bore witness to decades of a luxurious life full of stories, now silent in the absence of their matriarch. Roberto, the eldest, a determined businessman, watched impatiently out the window with his hands in the pockets of his perfect suit. He didn't hide his irritation with the wait. "I hope that old Estevao gets here soon. I have more important things to do than sit here, Sonia," Roberto said with impatience in his voice. Sonia, his middle sister, a renowned lawyer, looked up from the documents she was reviewing and cast a critical glance in Roberto's direction. "Roberto, Mom was more than just money. She always valued justice and equality. We are here to ensure her wishes are respected," Sonia asserted. Larissa, the youngest of the 3, remained quiet on the sofa, observing the exchange of words between her siblings. Her brown eyes reflected contained sadness, but also a serene determination. Unlike the other 2, she had inherited from their mother not only compassion but also a more detached view of material wealth. Before Roberto could respond to Sonia's reprimand, the door opened with a soft creak, revealing an elderly man with white hair and a serious posture. It was Mr. Estevao, Mrs. Carmen's trusted lawyer for more than 3 decades. He carried a worn leather briefcase and looked at the 3 siblings with a mix of respect and sadness. "My deepest condolences on the loss of Mrs. Carmen," Mr. Estevao said gravely and serenely. "She was a remarkable woman, and I am very sorry for her passing." The 3 children nodded silently, each absorbing the lawyer's words in their own way. "Let's get straight to the point, Mr. Estevao," Roberto interrupted, clearly impatient. "What's in the will? How much money are we talking about here?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses and took a deep breath before responding. Mrs. Carmen left very clear instructions on how she wanted her inheritance to be distributed. "Please, sit down. Let's discuss the details." The tension in Mrs. Carmen's living room intensified with Mr. Estevao's serious presence. He stood before the 3 siblings, holding a worn leather folder with the seriousness of someone carrying not just documents but the weight of his longtime client's final wishes. As the children settled around a mahogany table, Mr. Estevao began to outline Mrs. Carmen's will. Each word echoed in the room, blending with the silence heavy with the air's contained emotions. "Ladies and gentlemen," began the lawyer with a grave voice echoing through the silent hall, "we are here to read the last will and testament of the late Mrs. Carmen." His dark eyes scanned the heirs' faces, registering the mixture of expectation and tension in their expressions. A heavy silence hung in the air as Mr. Estevao carefully opened the folder. Every movement was calculated to heighten the ceremony of the moment. Roberto, impatient as always, coughed nervously before breaking the silence. "Well, let's get this over with. How much does each of us get?" His voice carried a tone of authority mixed with anxiety. Mr. Estevao raised a hand, silencing Roberto with a firm look. "It won't be that simple. Your mother's will contain special conditions." Sonia, the middle child, exchanged a significant glance with Larissa, the youngest, whose calm expression contrasted with Roberto's obvious impatience. Sonia then looked back at the lawyer, already beginning to speculate about what these special conditions might be. "What exactly does this mean, Mr. Estevao?" she asked, her voice carrying the seriousness of a lawyer accustomed to deciphering legal enigmas. The lawyer adjusted his glasses on his nose and responded slowly. Mrs. Carmen had a very particular vision of how her fortune should be distributed. Besides the material aspects, she also left clear instructions about the impact each of you could have on the world. "Everything will be explained shortly," the lawyer said, flipping through some papers. Prepared to hear their mother's final will, the three siblings looked at each other, confused. Larissa was the first to speak. "Yes, Mr. Estevao, we are ready." With a solemn nod, the lawyer began to read the carefully written words of Mrs. Carmen. "My dear children, if you are reading this, it is because I have left this earthly life. I know you all expect a fair division of my fortune, but there is one last wish to be fulfilled." Roberto then interrupted. "What is she talking about?" Mr. Estevao gave him a serious look. "If you'll allow me to continue, Mr. Roberto, everything will become clear." Larissa touched Roberto's arm, calming him. "Let him speak, Roberto." "We must respect Mom's wishes," Sonia agreed, though she seemed worried. She pondered silently for a moment. Mom always had her reasons. "Let's hear the rest." The lawyer cleared his throat and continued reading. "My fortune will not be easily divided among you. Instead, you will have to prove your worth through two challenges I have prepared. Only the one who overcomes both challenges with honesty and integrity will be considered worthy of inheriting my fortune." After the shocking revelation of the will, a stunned silence hung over the room. Sonia was the first to break the ice. The three siblings exchanged perplexed looks. Roberto was the first to speak again, clearly impatient. "Challenges? What kind of idea is this? Mom always liked to complicate everything. What does she mean by challenges?" Sonia asked with a trembling voice. "She can't be serious, can she, Mr. Estevao?" Larissa raised a thoughtful eyebrow. "Yes, this is quite unusual. Did she mention anything about this before?" The lawyer nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid your mother's instructions were clear and binding. She established two challenges that will determine who will inherit her fortune." Roberto slammed his hand on the table, his face red with anger. "This is ridiculous. I want my share of the inheritance now." "Calm down, Roberto," Mr. Estevao said firmly. "If you want the inheritance, you must fulfill your mother's wishes." Roberto huffed, clearly dissatisfied. "This is absurd. Mom always had her quirks, but this is too much." Larissa looked at her hands, silently absorbing the magnitude of her mother's demands. She had always known that Mrs. Carmen had high expectations, but this surpassed everything she could imagine. "I didn't expect this," admitted Sonia, looking at the lawyer with a mixture of uncertainty and determination. "But if this is what Mom wanted, then we need to take it seriously." Mr. Estevao nodded. "You have time to think and decide how to proceed. I will provide additional details about the challenges and the deadlines involved. Please understand that these are Mrs. Carmen's final wishes and must be respected." The silence that followed was no longer just stunned but charged with the understanding that their lives were about to change in unpredictable ways. The fate of their fortunes would not be determined solely by money but by the challenges they would have to face. Challenges that would test not only their abilities but also who they were as individuals. Larissa, usually the calmest of the three, looked at the lawyer with a mixture of confusion and concern. "What exactly are these challenges?" she asked. The lawyer cleared his throat and continued. The first challenge will take place in a dark room. Inside, there will be 3 identical boxes. One contains a key, another a poisonous scorpion, and the third, a venomous snake. A shiver ran down Larissa's spine at the ominous words. Roberto and Sonia exchanged worried looks. "Each of you must choose and open a box," continued Mr. Estevao. "The one who finds the key will move on to the second challenge." Roberto, always impulsive, interrupted. "This is madness. Mom must have gone mad before she died." Sonia looked at the lawyer, her eyes showing a mixture of anxiety and determination. "Mr. Estevao, this is extremely dangerous. We can't just agree without fully understanding the consequences." The lawyer nodded sympathetically. "I understand this is difficult to accept, but these are Mrs. Carmen's precise instructions. She believed that only by facing real challenges could you demonstrate your true worth." Larissa, despite the palpable nervousness, remained calm. "And if no one finds the key?" she asked. "Then you will fail the first challenge," replied Mr. Estevao simply, "and you will not be able to proceed to the second." Roberto was visibly agitated, but Larissa placed a hand on his shoulder, conveying a calmness she barely felt herself. "We have to think clearly and act cautiously. This is a unique opportunity that Mom has given us." Sonia took a deep breath, trying to reconcile her mother's wishes with the sense of responsibility she felt. "You're right. We need to fully understand what's at stake before making any decisions." "And what if we choose the wrong boxes?" Sonia asked, fear evident in her eyes. The lawyer shrugged somberly. "Well, then you will have to deal with the consequences." A dreadful silence fell over the room. Roberto finally broke the ice, his voice filled with determination. "Very well, if these are my mother's wishes, we will do as she says. Whatever the challenges, I will overcome them and claim what is rightfully mine." Sonia reluctantly agreed while Larissa watched in contemplative silence. The second challenge was still to come, and she felt there was more behind her late mother's plans. Mr. Estevao stood up, adjusting his glasses on his nose. "It's important that you understand the seriousness of these challenges. Mrs. Carmen didn't make this decision lightly." Larissa finally spoke in a calm voice, contrasting with the palpable tension in the air. "Mr. Estevao, you said the boxes are in a dark room. How will we know which one to choose?" The lawyer nodded, appreciating the young woman's thoughtful question. "Each of you will receive a flashlight. The boxes are arranged randomly, and you will have to rely on your instincts." Roberto let out an impatient sigh. "Let's just get this over with." "How long do we have to decide?" "You have until the end of this week to make your choices," Mr. Estevao replied. "I will be here to guide you, but the final decision will be up to each of you." Sonia looked at her siblings with a mixture of concern and resolve. "We need to prepare properly. We can't take this lightly." Larissa agreed, her mind already working on possible strategies to face the first challenge. "I agree with Sonia. We should consider all options before acting." The lawyer observed the 3 siblings with a look of deep respect. "Remember, it's not just the inheritance at stake here. It's the opportunity to honor your mother's legacy." The silence that followed was intense, charged with the understanding that their lives were about to be tested in ways they had never imagined. The fate of their inheritances would not be decided by a simple will, but by challenges that would test their emotional and physical limits. Mr. Estevao looked at the 3 siblings with a mixture of respect and compassion. "You have time to reflect on this," he said finally. I will be here to answer any questions you may have and to guide you through the next steps. The three siblings looked at each other, each immersed in their own thoughts as they tried to absorb the magnitude of the choices they would have to make. Then, they all came to an understanding at once. "We accept," they said. Roberto, taking the lead, announced, "Tomorrow we can start the first challenge." After the shocking decision to face the dangerous challenges, Roberto and Sonia gathered in a secluded corner of the mansion, away from the watchful eyes of Mr. Estevao and Larissa. "We can't let Larissa win this inheritance," Roberto whispered urgently. "You know how she is. She'll donate everything to charity without a second thought." Sonia agreed, her eyes shining with determination. "That naive girl has no idea what to do with so much money. Mom's fortune would be much better in our hands." Roberto nodded. "Exactly. We need to find a way to manipulate these challenges to our advantage." Sonia looked around, checking that they were indeed alone. "What do you suggest we do? How can we ensure that Larissa doesn't succeed and that we don't get caught?" A sarcastic smile curved Roberto's lips. "We'll make sure she chooses the wrong box in the first challenge. We know she trusts her instincts too much. We can influence that." Sonia frowned, worried about the idea of manipulating their own sister. "It seems risky. What if it goes wrong?" Roberto raised an eyebrow. "If we don't try, Larissa might leave us with nothing. We need to act before it's too late." As the siblings conspired, Larissa watched them from afar, with a growing sense of distrust in her chest. She had always known that Roberto and Sonia had material ambitions, but had never imagined that they would plot against her in this way. Mr. Estevao approached, interrupting her thoughts. "Larissa, is everything okay? You seem distant." She forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mr. Estevao. Just trying to understand all this." The lawyer studied her face for a moment, assessing her reactions. "Remember, Larissa, these challenges are a chance to show who you really are. Don't let external pressures influence you." Larissa nodded but felt a persistent unease. She knew she would have to trust herself more than ever to meet the challenges ahead. Meanwhile, Roberto and Sonia continued their conspiracy, determined to manipulate the circumstances in their favor. The fate of the inheritance was no longer just a matter of the challenges imposed by Mrs. Carmen, but also of betrayal among siblings who promised loyalty but were willing to do anything to secure their share of the fortune. The two drew closer, whispering. Eventually, a malicious plan began to take shape. "In the dark room challenge, you will try to bribe the person in charge to ensure you get the box with the key," Roberto instructed Sonia. "I'll make sure Larissa chooses the box with the venomous snake." Sonia smiled maliciously. "And if she survives that, then we'll work together in the second challenge." Roberto responded with a sinister gleam in his eyes. "We'll confuse and mislead Larissa until she's completely lost. The longer it takes, the better our chances." The two laughed darkly at the prospect of deceiving their own sister. Meanwhile, Larissa watched from afar, the feeling of distrust consuming her more and more. She noticed the secretive glances between Roberto and Sonia, and something inside her warned of impending danger. Determined to discover more, Larissa waited until Roberto and Sonia moved away before approaching Mr. Estevao, who was reviewing documents in a secluded corner of the room. "Mr. Estevao, may I speak with you for a moment?" she asked, keeping her voice low to avoid drawing attention. The lawyer looked at her with a gentle but reserved expression. "Of course, Larissa. How can I help you?" She hesitated for a moment, carefully choosing her words. I'm worried about the challenges Mom left us. I feel like Roberto and Sonia are planning something against me. Mr. Estevao frowned, concern rising in his tired eyes. Larissa, I feared something like this might happen. Your siblings are very ambitious when it comes to money. What can I do, Mr. Estevao? How can I ensure the challenges are fair? Larissa questioned. The lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder gently. First, trust yourself. Mom chose these challenges for a reason. They're not just about money but about honor, courage, and true character. Larissa nodded, feeling a bit of relief at the lawyer's comforting words. And what about my siblings? They won't stop until they defeat me. I will watch them closely, Larissa, Mr. Estevao responded firmly. And I will do my best to ensure the challenges are conducted fairly and transparently. As Larissa walked away, she felt an even greater determination growing within her. She knew she needed to be more vigilant than ever. Her siblings might be relentless, but she was determined to show that she deserved to inherit not only her mother's fortune but also her respect and trust. Meanwhile, Roberto and Sonia exchanged significant glances of mutual confidence. The plan was in motion, and they were confident they could manipulate the challenges in their favor. The game was just beginning, and every move was crucial in determining who would emerge victorious in the end. The next morning, the three siblings gathered again at the mansion, ready to face the first challenge. The room was dark, except for three identical boxes positioned in the center. Mr. Estevao awaited them with a solemn expression. Are you ready? The lawyer asked, his gaze sweeping over each of them. Roberto and Sonia exchanged a conspiratorial look, confident in their dark plan. Larissa simply nodded calmly. Very well then, said Mr. Estevao. Please follow me. He led them down a long corridor to a massive wooden door. When he opened it, a small room completely dark except for the three boxes in the center was revealed. Remember, the lawyer warned, one of these boxes contains the key to the next challenge. The other two, well, you already know. A shiver ran down their spines as Estevao left, locking the door behind him. Roberto and Sonia immediately put their plan into action. Let Sonia and me choose first, Roberto said with false kindness. We are older, so it's our responsibility. Before Larissa could respond, Sonia was already stealthily approaching one of the boxes, slipping some bills to the person in charge of the room, who subtly nodded, indicating which box contained the key with a movement of his head. Sonia opened the box and removed a small silver key. Look, I have the key, Sonia exclaimed triumphantly. Roberto then turned to Larissa with a forced smile. Why don't you try next, little sister? Innocently, Larissa approached the box Roberto indicated. As she extended her hand to open it, the door suddenly burst open with a bang, and a familiar figure hurried in. It was Fabio, their late mother's best friend, followed by the lawyer, Mr. Estevao. Stop everything, he shouted. I have proof that you two are cheating. Fabio held up a video device from which the recorded voices of Roberto and Sonia conspiring their evil plan emerged. Larissa's eyes widened in shock, while her siblings remained confused. Your mother predicted that you two would try to cheat, Fabio said, shaking his head in disappointment. She asked me to install hidden cameras and monitor everything. The real purpose of these challenges was to test your honesty and morality. Roberto and Sonia were speechless, the shame burning on their faces. Mr. Estevao entered, glaring at them with disdain. It seems you two will not inherit the fortune after all, the lawyer said coldly. Meanwhile, Larissa looked from one brother to the other, tears shining in her eyes. Her siblings' disloyalty hurt her deeply, but she couldn't help feeling an even greater sense of disappointment. Her mother had been right all along. Fabio approached her with compassion. "Larissa, I'm sorry you had to go through this. Your mother trusted you to do the right thing." Larissa nodded, still processing everything that had happened. "Thank you, Fabio. At least now I know the truth." The lawyer cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Larissa," he began, "you are the only one who demonstrated integrity in this test. As per your mother's wishes, the fortune is yours." Larissa blinked, barely believing what she was hearing. "But what about my siblings?" Mr. Estevao shook his head. "They will have no claim to the inheritance, as per the specific clauses in Mrs. Carmen's will." Roberto and Sonia remained silent, facing the consequences of their greed and dishonesty. There were no more arguments to be made. Larissa felt a mixture of relief and sadness. She would inherit her mother's fortune, but the price of her siblings' betrayal was too high to celebrate. Faced with the overwhelming evidence of their betrayal, Roberto and Sonia were confronted with the devastating consequences of their actions. Mr. Estevao approached with a mask of disappointment on his face. "You two should be ashamed," the lawyer reprimanded them. "Your mother trusted you to act with honor and integrity, yet you conspired to cheat from the start." Roberto tried to justify himself, but his words came out weak. We just wanted to ensure the inheritance went to those who truly deserved it." "Shut up," Sonia interrupted, turning to Fabio with pleading eyes. "Please, there must be some mistake. We didn't betray Larissa intentionally." Fabio sighed, looking at the siblings with a mix of pity and disgust. "The evidence is clear, Sonia. You two were caught in the act." Mrs. Carmen left no room for doubt about the purpose of the challenges. Mr. Estevao consulted the papers in his case before continuing with a firm voice. According to Mrs. Carmen's will, any attempt to manipulate the challenges would result in automatic disqualification from the inheritance. You have lost all rights to any part of it. Roberto clenched his fists, frustration and anger boiling within him. This can't be happening. Larissa doesn't deserve more than we do. Larissa demonstrated the true essence of the values your mother cherished, interjected Fabio, his expression serious. She was honest and faced the challenges without trying to manipulate them. While the discussion continued in the dark room, Larissa remained on the sidelines, watching everything with a mix of sadness and relief. She couldn't believe the depth of her siblings' greed, but she also felt a pang of gratitude for being recognized for her integrity. Finally, Mr. Estevao approached her with a gentle smile. "Larissa, as per your mother's wishes, you are indeed the sole beneficiary of the inheritance." Larissa nodded silently, thanking the lawyer. A new shock took over Roberto and Sonia's faces as Larissa let out a small sigh of surprise. She had never desired this fortune. "But this can't be right," Roberto protested, clear desperation in his voice. Larissa didn't even want the inheritance. Sonia joined the protest, tears streaming down her face. "Please reconsider. We will do anything for another chance." Larissa looked at her siblings with a broken heart. Part of her longed to avenge them, but her innate sense of kindness held her back. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "I accept the inheritance," she said calmly, raising a hand to silence Roberto and Sonia's protests, "but on one condition." Mr. Estevao and Fabio exchanged surprised glances. "And what would that be?" the lawyer asked. Larissa gave a slight smile. "That my siblings have a chance to redeem themselves," to prove that they can act with honesty and integrity from now on. Roberto and Sonia exchanged glances, still stunned by the turn of events. Fabio crossed his arms, considering Larissa's words with seriousness. "How do you propose this happen?" Mr. Estevao asked, his voice reflecting a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Larissa thought for a moment, weighing her words carefully. "My siblings will have a year. During this time, they will be closely monitored by Fabio and Mr. Estevao. If, by the end of this period, they demonstrate genuine change in their attitudes, then we can reassess the inheritance situation." "But a year is a long time," Roberto protested, but Mr. Estevao raised a hand to silence him. "It's a generous gesture from Larissa," the lawyer said, looking sternly at Roberto and Sonia. "Accept this opportunity with humility if you truly wish to make amends." Sonia wiped away her tears, her face expressing a mixture of gratitude and determination. "We accept," she said firmly, looking directly into Larissa's eyes. "We will prove we deserve another chance." Roberto reluctantly agreed, realizing he had no other option. "Very well," he muttered. Larissa smiled, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Then it's decided," Mr. Estevao agreed, satisfied with the resolution. "Fabio and I will ensure that this probationary period is fair and rigorous." Fabio nodded, placing a hand on Larissa's shoulder with gratitude. "You have shown true greatness today, Larissa." As the siblings left, each lost in their own thoughts, Larissa knew that the next year would be crucial. She sincerely hoped that Roberto and Sonia could find their way to redemption, for deep down, she still wanted to believe in the family they had once dreamed of being. In the days that followed, Larissa took control of the vast businesses and fortunes left by her late mother. As she adjusted to her new responsibilities, she constantly reflected on the chance for redemption she had offered her siblings. One day, while reviewing some documents in her office, she heard a knock on the door. "Come in," Larissa called. The door opened, and Roberto entered hesitantly. His eyes were lowered, and remorse was evident on his face. Larissa looked at him with a mixture of compassion and caution. Her green eyes, usually so firm, now showed a glimpse of vulnerability. She knew this moment was important not only for him but also for the family's future. I wanted to apologize once again for my actions during the will's challenges. I was consumed by greed and lost sight of what really matters," Roberto murmured, his words heavy with regret. Larissa pondered for a moment before responding, measuring her words carefully. "I understand, Roberto. What happened was painful for all of us, but I believe people can change if they are genuinely willing." Roberto nodded, his expression a mixture of relief and anxiety. "I know my words may not mean much now, but I am determined to make things right from now on. I want to redeem myself, Larissa. I want to prove that I can be trustworthy, that I can positively contribute to Mom's legacy." The sincerity in Roberto's words touched Larissa. She had always seen her brother as a relentless competitor, often willing to sacrifice principles for personal gain. However, there, in that moment of vulnerability, she saw a side of him rarely shown. "I believe in second chances, Roberto," Larissa said serenely. "But I won't make it easy. If you truly want to be part of this legacy, you'll have to prove your sincerity with concrete actions. Our businesses and charity projects require integrity and commitment." Roberto nodded with determination. "I understand. I don't expect it to be easy, but I'm willing to work hard and regain everyone's trust." Larissa smiled slightly, in a gesture of encouragement. "Start small, prove yourself every day. And if you need guidance or help, I'll be here to support you." Larissa then studied Roberto for a few more seconds, her penetrating gaze pondering his words and the sincerity in his eyes. She had faced many challenges since inheriting her mother's businesses and fortune, and Roberto's presence at that crucial moment could signify a turn for the better for both him and the family. "I accept your apology, Roberto. But actions speak louder than words. You need to prove you've changed," Larissa said firmly, maintaining her determined posture. Roberto nodded vigorously, his face expressing genuine determination. "I know, and that's why I'm here. I'd like to join you, work on one of your projects honestly." Surprised, Larissa raised her eyebrows. "Are you serious? You've always despised my charity work." Roberto lowered his eyes for a moment before meeting her gaze with sincerity. "Yes," he admitted, blushing slightly. "It was a terrible mistake on my part. Your work is noble and makes a real difference in people's lives. Please, let me help." Larissa studied her brother for another moment, evaluating his words and the emotions behind them. She saw a genuine change in Roberto, something he had never demonstrated before. A small smile curved her lips, a mix of hope and caution. "Very well, brother. I'll give you a chance," Larissa finally decided. "But at the first sign of dishonesty, it will be your last." Roberto nodded seriously, grateful for the opportunity given. "I understand. I promise not to disappoint you." With that, he left Larissa's office, feeling a mix of relief and determination. Roberto knew it wouldn't be easy to regain her trust and prove his own change, but he was willing to face the challenge. As Roberto walked away, Larissa reflected on the possibilities and challenges ahead. She had not only taken on the responsibility of the family's businesses, but also the role of guiding her siblings toward a path of righteousness and integrity. It was an immense responsibility, but she was determined to do whatever it took to keep her mother's legacy alive and strong. In the following weeks, Roberto dedicated himself entirely to one of Larissa's social projects, building a school for underprivileged children. Larissa closely monitored, observing Roberto working with renewed determination. One day, while walking through the construction site, she encountered Sonia. "Larissa, can I talk to you?" Sonia asked hesitantly. Larissa nodded. "Of course, what is it?" Sonia twisted her hands nervously. I also wanted to apologize and accept your offer of redemption. Seeing Roberto working so hard inspired me. I want to do the right thing this time." Larissa's smile widened. "I'm glad to hear that, Sonia. There will be a place for you here if you truly want to redeem yourself." Tears welled up in Sonia's eyes as she hugged Larissa. "Thank you for this chance. I won't let you down again." Larissa looked at Sonia with tenderness. "I'm here to help you rebuild our family, Sonia. Together, we can make a difference." As Roberto and Sonia strove for redemption, Larissa continued to manage the businesses with wisdom and compassion. The school began to take shape quickly, driven by the hard work and renewed passion of everyone involved. As the days passed, they became a united team, dedicated to realizing their mother's vision. However, not everything was simple. The path to redemption was filled with challenges. Roberto struggled to distance himself from his old habits of manipulation and greed, frequently tempted to follow his selfish impulses. Meanwhile, Sonia found it difficult to rebuild her self-confidence, questioning whether her sincere actions would be enough to make up for the dark past. Larissa faced her own dilemmas, balancing her new responsibility with the need to guide her siblings. With each step, she recalled her mother's lessons of integrity and compassion, trying to be the example her siblings needed to follow. In the following months, Roberto and Sonia dedicated themselves intensely, working alongside Larissa on her various social projects. Gradually, the bitterness and greed that once consumed them began to fade, replaced by a new sense of purpose and satisfaction. Each day, they grew closer to the children benefiting from the school they helped build, and each child's smile was a powerful reminder of what really mattered in life. Larissa watched her siblings with pride, amazed at the transformation she witnessed. It seemed that, by facing challenges and rediscovering the value of generosity and honest work, Roberto and Sonia were also rediscovering themselves. Conversations about financial strategies gave way to discussions about how to improve children's education, and the competitiveness between them was replaced by genuine collaboration. One sunny day, while Larissa walked through the school's gardens, she saw Roberto and Sonia participating in activities with the children. The two laughed together, helped paint murals on the walls, and distributed school supplies. The sight warmed Larissa's heart, reminding her of how far they had come since that fateful day of the will reading. In the evening, when the volunteer work was over, the three siblings gathered in the school's administration office. Sitting around the table, they exchanged looks full of gratitude and mutual understanding. "I can't believe how much things have changed," said Sonia with a sincere smile. "Larissa, thank you for believing in us and giving us this opportunity." Roberto agreed, his expression now softened by a lightness that hadn't been there before. "You showed us the way, Larissa. I never imagined I could feel so fulfilled." Larissa smiled, feeling a mix of emotions. "You two did all the hard work. I just offered a chance. It's amazing to see how you embraced it." The trio shared a moment of silence, absorbing the magnitude of what they had achieved together. Their mother's legacy, which initially seemed like a shadow over them, now shone as a beacon of hope and renewal. "I know we can't change the past, but we can shape our future," Roberto said finally, looking at his sisters with determination. "Let's keep making a difference here. I promise we will never lose sight of what really matters." Sonia agreed, her expression determined. "And we will never stray from the path of integrity. This school is just the beginning." Larissa felt a lump in her throat, deeply touched by her siblings' words. "Mom would be so proud of you," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion. "You are truly her legacy." And so, united by the transformative experience of redemption and dedication to a greater good, the three siblings moved forward. After a year, Roberto and Sonia had demonstrated a true change and, thus, received their share of the inheritance. Together, the three continued to lead not only a school for underprivileged children but also a promising future and a new family foundation rooted in true wealth, generosity, compassion, and honesty. Did you enjoy the story? Thank you for your company. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what you thought of the story. See you next time.